All right. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm so used to saying happy Thursday. We've got a day change today. So happy Wednesday. Thanks so much for joining me. Just a quick intro. My name is Rosalie Prendergast. I'm a board certified behavior analyst practicing in Colorado. Today we've got kind of rainy, snowy, all sorts of crazy weather going on out here. But I'm excited to talk with you guys about this topic. Please feel free, if you feel comfortable, just say hello in the chat where you're from. It's always fun to see how Crowdcast really does kind of bring the world together. It's quite fun. There is below me, you're going to see a green button that has the PDF that I'm going to be presenting and talking off of today. There's also a feedback form in there that I'll show you here in a minute. So I am going to share my screen and we'll get started for today. All right. Okay. So today we are talking, this is kind of a little series in kind of how the medical model says pathological demand avoidance, or kind of in this social model, really thinking about, strengths of individuals with this profile, thinking more kind of persistent demand for autonomy. So just a little mini series kind of around this very special, unique population that we don't quite have a go-to kind of set of treatment support systems for them yet, right? We've got some things that work and we've got things that we know don't work. Last week, we kind of went through a lot of that. So if you didn't watch last week, go ahead and kind of pop back over there at some point in time. The PDF is up, so you can just grab that too. But today we're really going to be talking about willingness and overcoming that avoidance game, right? Just the avoidance of everything, right? Even things that are highly engaging, highly valued, but that avoidance is still so much more powerful than kind of that willingness to try different things. So that's kind of our game plan for today. Here's that parent feedback form. We really want to make sure that these parent learning events are helpful to you guys. So do fill that out. Give us suggestions, right? Say, hey, this worked really well for me. This didn't work so well. I want more information on this topic. We are happy to kind of tailor things. So we're going to get started with our shared purpose matrix. This is a noticing tool. From acceptance and commitment therapy. It's kind of part of the third wave of kind of behavior therapies. If you want more information on this tool specifically, I would suggest going to check out Matrix Talk on Crowdcast. They have a lot of wonderful events that they do that are very kind of, I would say, human friendly, right? You don't have to be a clinician. You can totally be a parent, show up there and learn a lot about the ACT matrix. But this tool today, we're going to do a quick loop around. Just our shared purpose is talking about that willingness, right? That willingness in the avoidance game. So I'm going to ask a few questions, starting off in that kind of lower right-hand corner. If you feel like throwing some in the chat, feel free. If not, don't worry about it. I've got a lot on this topic. So the first question I'm going to ask, which is down here in this kind of mental experiencing realm, right? Not necessarily something that we can touch with those five senses experiencing, but more that's kind of inside of us, right? That really, it's definitely available to people that know us very well, but not very available to people that don't have a long history with us, that mental experiencing. So who or what is important to you in our shared purpose today? And I'm going to say parents, all of us right off the bat. Parents, clinicians, funders are important. Educators are important. I think different biases are important, right? We've got lots of things that go on in our minds about kind of like what kids are supposed to do, what's supposed to be motivating, how are they supposed to be willing to engage in this, right? We've got lots of ideas in there. I think cultures are important. I think autonomy is important in this discussion. Let's see. I think communities right? Like extended family are really important in these discussions. All right, kind of our next kind of quadrant over, which is kind of our lower left-hand quadrant, which says what yucky stuff shows up and gets in the way. And for me, right off the bat, I'm gonna throw out kind of the word anger, right? I do get a little bit angry, right? We're trying to help, we're trying to support, we're trying to get the individuals we support to things that we know that they're gonna love, right? And a little bit of that anger shows up. It's like, why won't you just try? Anxiety and fear always show up, right? Is this going to get any better, right? I think doubt shows up. Am I doing the right thing? Like, how hard is this? Old rules show up, right? Old rules like, man, if I find that right parrot, that right motivator, if I find that right punisher, right, I'm going to be able to get this kid kind of where they need to be, right? My kid's going to finally follow those, rules that I want them to. They're going to engage in life the way I want them to. And I think, like we said about biases, kind of what's important to us, noticing those biases, I think biases show up big time here, right? What are those kids supposed to be doing? And it really does kind of get in the way of what we're trying to do, of how we're trying to support their willingness. So that's kind of some of the yucky stuff that shows up. There's a lot of yucky stuff that shows up. I'm going to actually throw in the frustration too. Frustration, you get tired, just kind of want to quit sometimes, right? That feeling of just like, let me out, shows up too. Just get me out of here. All right. If we travel up, now we're kind of in our five senses experiencing. These are things that other people have more access to, right? We can see or hear, touch, those five senses experiencing. It's kind of less inside. So what behaviors will I see or hear you using to get relief from that yucky stuff? You're going to see me do a lot of phone a friend, to do a little bit of complaining, venting. You're going to see me overproducing. I will overproduce visuals. This visual is going to help. I'm going to make a social story. Right? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, right? I'm going to get all of these things in place, right? I'm going to find the right therapist, find the right person. Right? I'm going to even get a little bit superstitious. I don't know how to spell superstitious. Superstitious. We'll go with that. And I'm sure a red line's going to come up, but there we go. Right? I might kind of have wine with friends. I might go on a hike. I might yell at my child. I might kind of hide out, right? Just kind of like close down. That's it. I'm done for a little bit, right? That's a pretty good list of behaviors that you might see me using to get relief from that yucky stuff, right? Those yucky emotions that show up, that get in the way, that make things hard. Sometimes we can get in that loop, right? Where we're kind of stuck, getting relief from that yucky stuff. In our next quadrant over, our last one, the kind of upper right, again, we're still in that five senses experiencing. We're thinking about what behaviors will I see or hear you using to move towards what's important as our group, right? Today, we're talking about that willingness, right? What's important there? And I think the first thing I'm going to say is shared control, right? Sharing control with that individual is really important when we're moving towards kind of willingness to move towards things yourself, right? What do you care about here in this context? Collaboration, right? Willingness on our own part, right? Like I need to be willing, right? To support another person in being willing. And I'm also going to say, be okay being uncomfortable. Be okay being uncomfortable. Right? And I think being resourceful here is important, right? Sometimes there isn't an answer, right? If there was an answer, there wouldn't be such kind of this buzz around kind of PDA, right? I think that we would have that as a diagnosis in the United States, right? Right now, it's kind of much more recognized across the pond and in Australia, right? So we don't have a lot of resources. So we've got to get resourceful. We've got to be creative to move towards this willingness piece. We've got to be able to think outside of the box. And I think the other huge piece with this willingness is moving slow, right? Being okay with slow, right? It's sometimes we want that kind of overnight quick movement, and it's just slow, right? With this anxiety-based disorder, this anxiety-based challenge. I'm trying to move away from some of those words like disorder. It's just a difference, right? It's a difference in how we approach the world. All right. So I know for sure kind of during this time that we're together, I'm going to be able to notice all of this showing up. And you guys may as well as some other things that show up for you as we go. So we are going to do a quick loop around the noticing grid, which is the happy medium approach point of view. This is an incredibly useful tool for noticing. It is very helpful for individuals. Oh, hey, Kathy. Nice to see you. Patience, empathy, and compassion. Those totally all go in that, how are we going to move towards this, towards that kind of willingness for sure. So the noticing grid is a wonderful tool for these individuals, for a lot of individuals. I actually spend a lot of time thinking about the noticing grid from my own perspective. And when you first start to use the noticing grid, it's a great idea to sit down and actually create your own first before you create one for your child or for anybody else. So just a quick loop around, I want to make sure it's really important to remember that there are no lists of behaviors that go in any of these quadrants, right? These are truly individualized. What does that person look like, right? What is support like for that individual? What are that person's tools? So, Serena, Crowdcast, the CEUs work. This one isn't a CEU. The CEU one is going to be coming up. I think I'm doing the CEU one in about an hour. So the CEU one is from 12 to 1. This is for parents. So sorry. But pop onto that one. So when we're thinking about our noticing grid, we've got our noticing levels, right? Level 1 is when we're just right, we're matching the environment, we're engaged, right? That is our own individual engagement. That is our own matching, right? Each of us have our own different bubbles in terms of kind of how we match a context. So we want that to be very highly individualized. Our level 2 is when we're starting to get a little bit too big or starting to get a little bit too small. Our level 3 is the easiest level to define for everybody, right? It's when we're clearly too big for the environment, right? That would be hitting, kicking, dangerous, unsafe behaviors. Those are things that are easily picked out, often written home about. Oftentimes we get phone calls about, home from school about those, things like that, right? But level 1 and level 2 don't get a lot of attention sometimes, but that's really where we want to spend a lot of our time. Our next column over is what people see. We want to objectively define these levels for each person because they're different. Everybody's unique in what their escalation curve looks like. And the reason we want to know is because we want to be able to support quickly, right? We don't want an individual to have to get to fight, flight, freeze at that level 3 to gain support. We want to do that when they're just starting to become dysregulated. So that's why we want to really highlight, what do they look like? Parents know, right? You guys know, you guys are experts, right? You guys have lived and have all of that history. Providers, teachers, we don't know those signs of escalation quite as well as you do. So being able to outline them is a huge help to noticing, to our noticing. Our next column over is what other people will do. These are all of our supportive strategies. When a person is matching the context, when your child's doing a great job, they're engaged in their way, right? How do we support them in staying there? How are we going to support that engagement, that access to joy, right? And as they move up the escalation curve, what things are we going to do to support them, right? How are we going to help them get back to regulated, fast, right? Not waiting for them to kind of hit that fight, flight, freeze, but how are we going to support them at low levels of escalation? And then the next column over is all of the skills and tools that we want to support them with. And we're going to talk so much about those today, right? How are we going to support building a big repertoire of skills that can support our willingness? So that's our big discussion today. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about where these skills might go on the noticing grid. And today's conversation is kind of framed out from a DNAV, which is a model of psychological flexibility. It was developed in Australia, and it's just wonderful. There's a lot of resources at DNAV International for adults, for kids. It's something that I've seen when families adopt it as a model of their home, their context. We see a lot of wonderful changes for not only the child, but for the adults in the context as well. So I'm going to do a quick loop around the DNAV characters for psychological flexibility, and then we're really jumping into our content. But the noticing grid and these DNAV characters are really like a foundation, right? We're kind of pouring the cement to then talk about kind of how we're going to build the house of willingness. So our first DNAV character is the discoverer, right? This skill is very, very weak, maybe even kind of non-existent for individuals with that kind of avoidance game as being kind of a big part of their existence, right? The discoverer involves kind of stepping into a space that's a little bit uncomfortable. It's out of your comfort zone. It's a space where you broaden your skills. You broaden those connections with other people, and you contact more resources, right? You're building up your resource bucket. It's kind of known as trial and error learning, right? Like you do it and see how it turns out, right? There isn't a known answer. And that is really scary for individuals that have that anxiety profile, that PDA profile, right? You mean to tell me you're going to ask me to do something that I don't know how it's going to turn out for me? No, thanks. I'm out of here, right? Then we have kind of the advisor. That's our inner coach, our inner critic, right? Guiding you. It supports safety. It supports acting efficiently. And it helps you avoid trial and error learning, right? So kind of in this PDA profile, our advisors are a little bit overactive, right? Saying, no way, that's going to turn out bad. Don't do that, right? It's almost like a willingness blocker, right? Like, you can't do that. Don't step out of that comfort zone, right? Our valuer, right? That is the character. What is important to you, right? Like, why would we do anything to begin with, right? Who do we want to be as a person, right? What behaviors are important to who we are that make up us? And those are those kind of guiding. We can kind of think about that as the compass. I don't want to say moral compass, but as our personal compass, right? Our values are kind of why we do things. A lot of roads lead back to the noticer, right? Noticer is the character that notices emotion showing up, notices body sensations, notices the context around us, and gathers all of that information, right? As you can already tell, these characters kind of work together, right? You can teach skills kind of in a silo in terms of these are discoverer skills, these are advisor skills. But when this is in action in live context, all of these skills are working together. Your noticer might work with your advisor and your discoverer. Your valuer's kind of always hanging out there, right? Because why else do we behave? Why else do we do things, right? Because we really care about who we are and the things that are important to us. That self-view, right? We're not going to touch too much on self-view. This might be kind of that's like a whole nother hour chat, is this self-view. But self-view is breaking free from those self-limiting beliefs, right? A lot of our PDA guys put themselves in a box, right? This is who I am. This is what I do. And it's very hard to stretch that comfort zone, to change, to break free from those self-limiting beliefs, right? So the self-view uses all of our characters to support that you're more than you already know. You can do more, right? You can change, you can grow, you can shift. And then our social view, which is how we build super strong connections with other and manage difficult people. So I think I said earlier, we've seen a lot of wonderful growth and changes for families that adopt this as a unit, right? Practicing or living from this place of psychological flexibility. I work with my team on practicing from a place of psychological flexibility. And the self view really helps, right? Because there is a lot that shows up. There's a lot of yucky stuff that shows up when you're trying to support a person that it's very challenging. You can't externally motivate them with carrots or, sticks, those consequence-based things, right? There's a lot that shows up. So how do you create and deepen that connection using your tools in that self-view? All right. I know it always takes a little bit of time to kind of get to the meat of stuff, but these foundations are really important. So when we're talking about willingness, we want to really differentiate between willingness and avoidance, right? Willingness is kind of the consent and readiness to do something, right? We've got this avoidance game in place, right? And that's just the act of moving away, right? Keeping away. I'm out of here, right? And the way that I think about it is willingness is an individual who's under appetitive control. And I know that's kind of it's a very clinical term, right? Appetitive. But what we mean by that is they are moving towards that. They are taking steps towards that. An individual is moving towards that, right? When we're talking about that avoidance game, almost everything for that individual is kind of under aversive control, right? We do things to get away from other things, right? Like maybe we clean our room to get away from our parent nagging, right? Or, we go to the guidance counselor's room to get away from everything, right? Everything we do is to get away from something, right? So when we're thinking about this kind of appetitive learning under willingness, right? Willingness to carry emotions and move towards what's important to us. When we're kind of in that avoidance game or under that aversive control, so much of it is how am I going to get out of here, right? How am I moving away? How am I going to get relief from these emotions that are showing up, right? That these people, these places, these learning activities, these items, these demands, these, fears, emotions, all of that stuff, like even light emotions, like excited, when we're under kind of appetitive control, that individual wants to move towards that excitement, right? When we're under that aversive control, right, they want to move away from all of those emotions, even sometimes those really light emotions that most of us would see as kind of pleasant or, again, for us might be under appetitive control and for them is still under aversive control. Now, the challenge with this, when we're differentiating willingness, kind of being under some appetitive control, I want to move towards that, and, that avoidance game, when you're in that avoidance game, you have a really small set of skills to draw on, right? The individual's got fight, flight, freeze, collapse, right? A pretty good repertoire, but that's pretty small. That isn't a lot of available skills to draw from in a lot of different contexts that they might find themselves in, right? That doesn't work very well when you're in a restaurant, engaging with your family. Not very helpful for school, right? So when we have that small repertoire, the individual is really limited, right? Everything is kind of closed down. That's all they've got, right? When we move over to that kind of appetitive control and we're thinking about that willingness, right? Willingness to carry some hard stuff, willingness to step into the uncomfortable, right? We get in that discoverer space, right? We get to contact more resources. We get to build more skills, right? We get to build skills around emotional regulation. We get to build skills around flexibility when we're willing to be a little bit uncomfortable. We get to work on shifting, right? Shifting from things we love to other things we love, not just from, right? As a society, I think one of our rules is kids need to learn how to go from doing something they really like to doing something they don't like. If we pause and kind of think about our daily life, right, we might shift between things that are on like a priority continuum, right? Sometimes we're shifting from a highly preferred to a highly not preferred. Other times we're shifting between different values in there, right? But that's a skill set in itself. It doesn't need to be a pull, right? Preferred to non-preferred. Working on that shifting can be in between that, which can support building that kind of big repertoire that you're looking for, right? 2 skills of going from preferred to non-preferred isn't going to give us really what we need in terms of availability of that skill. Obviously, communication, right? Communication is huge. If we're communicating, if an individual is communicating through fight, flight, freeze, collapse, right? We know that some of that behavior is communication, right? We need a bigger, broader repertoire of communication, right? How are we going to talk about emotions showing up, right? What contexts are those? We need that communication repertoire to be really big. And under appetitive control, that individual wants to move towards communicating, right? That's something that is helpful for them. So I have a couple of what ifs here, right? What if my child has a long history of avoidance, right? That's okay, right? We know that. History, we can never take away somebody's history, right? History is history. It's kind of like, I use a glass of spilled milk as an example for this, right? Like once kind of, we've got history, it's like spilled milk. You can't put that spilled milk back in the cup, no matter how much you try. So if your child has a very long history of avoidance, that's okay. It's just going to take a little bit more time to beef up that new history, but we got to start somewhere, right? And we've got to recognize that's a really strong set of skills for them. That fight, flight, freeze, collapse, that's really strong. And these other appetitive skills are not very strong for them. So we've got to support them in building that new repertoire of skills. And don't forget, like avoidance and appetitive stuff go together, right? We don't, again, it's not poles like the preferred and non-preferred, right? There's all sorts of mixes in between, right? But we're trying to get to a space where it's more appetitive and less aversive. There are always going to be things in life that we, want to work to get away from. I mean, that's just kind of the reality of being a human. So if your child has that long history, that doesn't mean that we're doomed, right? It just means it's going to take a little bit longer to build up those skills, because that advisor is really active in saying, this doesn't work for us. This doesn't work for us, right? We've got a lot more skill building to do before that advisor is going to be like, all right, maybe we can give this a try. Maybe you can step in to discover our space, right? That's really important. So next one, what if? What if there's nothing my child wants to move towards, right? What if there's nothing? There's another spelling error. But what if there's nothing my child wants to move towards? That's okay too, right? Right now, they're under that kind of aversive control. We've got to find some things, right? That's where that willingness to go outside of the box, willingness to get creative is key, right? There'll be something in there, but we've got to support them in finding it. What if my child will only do something to escape something else, right? Like you have to lay down the law, no electronics until you've brushed your teeth, right? Like even if you've removed every single demand except for health and safety demands in your home, right? Because that's helpful for the PDA profile, right? Removing all demands except for those safety and health demands. But what if those are all based around kind of, I'm going to get out of this, aversive control, right? You need to brush your teeth or you won't get your electronics. You can't play with your friends, whatever it might be, right? That's okay too, right? It just means we've got to build this other skill set for them. We've got to kind of flip the script and try to not trying to get rid of avoidance, but trying to build this entire appetitive repertoire of skills for them that they want to move towards. They want to use those things to move towards anything. Bribery is the only way, right? There's some of that too, right? Where it's like they want extremely expensive, video games, toys, things like that. And you're like, man, like there's no way I'm going to be able to keep up with this, right? That's okay too. We've got to broaden that repertoire of skills. We'll get there, right? We'll get to a place where that isn't the only way. All right. So for all of these guys, we've just got to do that paradigm shift, right? Everybody's got us all so focused on all of these kind of undesirable behaviors, maladaptive behaviors, behaviors that keep them away from their education, behaviors that won't work in the real world, right? Like we've got all these people kind of yelling at us, telling us those things. That's never going to fly in high school. Or how are they ever going to hold down a job? Right? We need to do a little paradigm shift, right? Instead of thinking about like, gosh, oh my gosh, like now I need relief from that conversation, right? Like, right? Think about how are we going to start minimizing that aversive control, right? How are we going to start reducing the carrot and stick stuff we use? How are we going to start reducing those demands again that aren't related to safety? And how are we going to move slowly? Right? We've got to move really slowly and thoughtfully. But we've got to move in that direction. We've got to move in that skill building, that whole new repertoire, stepping into that discoverer space, building our resources, building our repetitive network of skills that are hopefully going to be much bigger and broader than our kind of very small box of avoidance strategies, avoidant behaviors. So the first thing, we've got to strengthen that noticer, right? So many roads lead back to the noticer, right? PDA is based in anxiety and it's full of emotions, like big feels all around, big excited feelings, big heavy emotions, big sad, big worried, right? It's big feels. It's a lot of emotions all the time. So let's chat kind of noticer skills. One of the first skills that's really critical is naming, noticing first, right? You got to notice an emotion and you got to name it. So working really hard on, and I use this visual all the time. It's just kind of something that's out. I've actually have a new packet that I'm laminating right here that has this in it, because it's just so critical, right? Like, this is something that goes with me whatever session I'm in, it's out and available so that when something happens, we can talk about like, hey, did that swing to the heavy side, right? Was that a heavy emotion that showed up that's a little harder to carry? Or was that a light emotion that showed up? It's a little bit easier to carry. And some individuals, right, might be very averse to this at first, right? Like talking emotions. They've probably been talked at about emotions forever, right? Like, come on, tell me how you're feeling about that situation, right? Which just kind of throws them straight into fight, flight, freeze, and they're kind of out, right? So this has to be done in a thoughtful way to make it again, we're thinking about building that appetitive network that they want to move towards, not just getting them to, under aversive control, answer a question about how they felt, right? We want this to be helpful and useful for them. Another really important piece about this visual is that whether you have heavy emotions show up or light emotions show up when you're using your noticer, the things that you do are similar, right? You have to tolerate, you got to cope, you might have to shift, you can compromise, you can ask for help, you can talk out loud, right? I think a lot of times society makes us think that heavy emotions are bad and we need to get rid of them. Cognitive behavioral therapy certainly does that, right? They're like, well, just shift your thinking to positive thinking, right? But that doesn't always work. Those heavy emotions come back like a boomerang, just like light emotions come back like a boomerang. So emotions just keep showing up. It's just part of the human condition. So helping them to notice that both light and heavy emotions are part of life, but one set is easier to carry than others, right? Easier to step into that discover space with, right? Light emotions are easier to step into that discover space, whereas heavy emotions are much harder. So you can do this, and we'll talk about kind of strategies about how to support this skill from launching. Probably just coming into your kiddo with this visual, they're going to be like, out, aversive, I don't like visuals. I actually had a kiddo do that. I pulled my little book that's always with me kind of out of my out of my bag the other day, and he was like, I don't like papers. I was like, all right, I'm going to put that away. Right. So this visual might not come out for a little while, but this is something, for you to be thinking about, for you to be modeling, and for you to really be, I call it kind of the emotion label monster, right? You know your human really well and probably can predict what emotion is showing up for them. So even if this visual can't come out because it is too aversive, because papers are aversive to your human, that's okay. Doesn't need to come out, but just be thinking about it on the regular. Next one is noticing and naming kind of body sensations, right? That noticer is in charge of those emotions and body sensations. I think a lot of our PDA guys, they are so anxious, right, that they don't notice when they're hungry. They don't notice when they have to go to the bathroom, right? They don't notice when they're too hot, too cold, right? Because they don't even notice when they're hurt, because that flood of emotions is so big. That is where their noticer is focused, or their noticer is focused on the context and avoiding whatever they possibly can in that context to get some relief from the emotions, from the anxiety, the fear, the worry that's showing up for them, that they don't notice those body sensations for basic needs. So obviously, again, when you notice this, we're not going to go up and just say, hey, you need to tell me what your body's feeling right now. This can be kind of a label monster opportunity too. Oh, it looks like you're really hungry when they're shoveling food. I wonder what your body was noticing about that. But those body sensations are really important. They're indicators, right? They're indicators to us that we need to do something. We need to act. We need to use a behavior. And again, those are so challenging because it's almost like the emotions and getting relief, getting away, moving away is so important under that aversive control that we're not really noticing those things. Next is kind of noticing and naming the context, right? What emotions show up based on what context, right? Can we get some predictability for our advisor, right? Do we notice, is it because things changed? Is it because stuff was unexpected? Is it because it was hard? Is it because it was known or unknown, right? Was it a sticky word that kind of sent us straight to mental experiencing? I know for a lot of our guys, writing is something that can quickly send us to fight or flight. There's a lot of other things too, but the word no, the word you have to, those words become really sticky. I actually found a sticky word for one of my PDA profile individuals the other day. We were playing this amazing game of we had a scooter, one of those scooters in gym that you like push around. Anyway, I put a jump rope through the handle and was pulling her. And I was saying, hold on. And every time I said, hold on, she started to get a little bit escalated. And after three times of saying, hold on, I was like, oh my gosh, that word is so sticky for her. That word has been something that has been used in place of the word like wait, or like, you're not going to get that, right? Like, hold on, you can't go do that. So I found that sticky word. It took me a couple of opportunities. I was like, wow, she's having a miss. I'm telling her, hold on so that I can help her have some more joy. And when I say hold on, she's thinking that I'm going to say, no, you can't do this anymore. So she's under aversive control saying, I want out of here, right? Like, I want you to do more of this, Rosalie. So anyway, I could do a couple hours on sticky words to begin with, but we want to be able to notice and name that too, right? That word sends me to mental experiencing. A lot of emotions show up and I start to escalate or get to a level 2 and 3 on my noticing grid. Those demand loads or rock stacking, right? Sometimes you've got really big rocks. Like I stepped into my Discover space today and I tried something new. That's a giant rock, right? Maybe, mom gave me my second favorite macaroni and cheese. Kind of that's another rock. Maybe it's not as big as stepping into the Discoverer space, right? Or there was a really annoying noise, buzzing from the light. That's kind of it could be a giant rock for some kids. For other kids, it might be a pebble, right? But being able to notice and name how many things have I have heavy emotions kind of loaded on me in a rock stacking way that's going to kind of collapse on me. So being able to notice that and kind of report that, what is going on around me that made those emotions show up for me, or those body sensations as well. Next, under this noticer category, is really thinking about the size of the emotion, right? Can I carry this emotion and move towards what I care about in this situation, right? And again, you got to remember, it's so hard. Society is kind of like given us this pile of things that kids are supposed to care about, right? Like they're supposed to care about pleasing their teacher. They're supposed to care about matching their peers, right? We've got this list of things. They're kind of rules, societal rules, but we've got to be really thoughtful. Are those what that individual, is that what your child cares about? What do they really care about that's going to support them in moving to that appetitive space where they want to, they have the willingness to do this. So when we're thinking about weight of emotions, are they light? Are they medium? Are they heavy? Can I carry this? Do I need relief? Right? When we were up doing our matrix, right, there's a whole list of relief behaviors, right? That's okay. We all need relief. There isn't like a written script here, right? That's like light emotions like happy you can carry, heavy emotions like mad you can't carry, right? Every context is a little bit different. This is where I think we get so, we make a lot of mistakes in intervention, right? We try to kind of make it so concrete that we forget the fluid nature of living, right? Of being a human, depending upon how many rocks you have stacked, right? That might make an emotion heavier than usual. It might be kind of a light mad usually if you can't find something you're looking for, but man, you've already had a whole bunch of rocks stacked. That makes that mad really heavy, and you need relief. You're not going to carry it into discover space or towards your values, right? You're going to get relief. You're going to say, I got to put this rock down right now. So how do we get some of these skills off the ground, right? How do we get them moving? If your individual is averse to visuals, don't bring visuals out, right? Just start talking about it. Have it become part of your language, right? And I even have some individuals that are like, I hate the way you're talking about that, right? They pick up quickly that I've kind of changed how we're talking about things, and you could just kind of gently keep going. We're not kind of trying to be aversive and we're changing this and doing this, but we are trying to slowly, subtly make a shift, so find that space that's the least averse for them and be there for a minute. So don't make a big deal if they label their emotions, right? Like, I think our PDA guys are not party guys after they've done something awesome. But remember, that's individual too. Some guys are, depending upon the person. I might be able to throw a party, but mom can't, right? So who know that context, right? But don't make a big deal of it. Just kind of move on. You can have a massive party in your head because that's really exciting when that happens. But be calm and make sure that you're engaging with them in a way that works for them. And try to provide relief, right? If they do label an emotion or a body sensation, man, try to get them relief from that quickly. I know we're talking about like aversive control, working away, but man, labeling their emotion, moving towards talking about that is really awesome. And the fact that they did it on their own willingness train is huge. So provide relief, right? If it's a sibling who has taken a toy and they're like, I'm mad at you, man, go get that toy and take it back. I know it's going to make emotions show up for your other child, but while we're building this, we've got to have a little bit of give and take. If it's a loud noise, turn it off, right? Get rid of whatever it is that was producing that emotion if you can, right? There's some context that you can't. But do get them relief. That's how we're going to build up that doable step into that discoverer space, right? They stepped into that discoverer space. They used their noticer. They said an emotion out loud. They haven't been doing that. That is definitely some lovely discoverer space. So provide relief right away, if you can, and then just keep going, keep building. All right. So that valuer, what do they care about? Again, that noticer is kind of the foundation, right? If we don't notice that stuff showing up, right, and that it's going to be really challenging to move towards anything. So the valuer, what do they care about? This is kind of our next, right? Like, why do I do this? And again, remember, we've got kind of society's rules. Society says these are the things kids should care about, right? Or maybe our culture has that list, like this is what kids should care about. Maybe we as parents have those rules. These are our family values, right? Those are all important, right? But in order to get and launch this appetitive willingness to do things on our own accord, right? Not because we're dangling a stick or we're, gonna get a huge stick ready, right? But why do they want to do this? What would they want to move towards? This is just a nice list of kind of kid values from the Berkeley Wellbeing Institute. I find it just helpful to look at some of these things, and then you can think about, like, is that a value for my human, right? Well, how does this go, right? Empathy, right? Patience, peace, patriotism. I actually had a kiddo the other day that their whole room is like plastered in the American flag, right? Like they're one of their values is patriotism. That's pretty cool. For them, right? So we want to be thinking about what are those values. And for littles, right, values we find for them by watching what they naturally move towards. What are their toys, right? What are the activities that they ask you to play with them? What are the shows that they watch? What brings them joy, right? Those little things. But that's just a helpful list. So again, what do they kind of independently engage in? What helps make light emotion show up for them, right? Those are usually things that they really care about. I want to make sure, again, these are not to identify motivators. A lot of therapists come in and they ask you, right, what is motivating for your child, so that they can utilize those, kind of harness those in kind of that carrot and stick way to promote that individual in learning skills. And that is highly effective for some individuals. For PDA guys, this doesn't work very well often. Sometimes you can get there, but it's kind of, they feel a little bit manipulated, and like, that anxiety shows up in a bigger way. So we're not trying to identify these to find motivators, to find reinforcers, right? We are identifying these values so that we can support them in developing skills that are going to help them move towards those things that they care about. Under that imperative control, under that willingness umbrella, right? We're willing to do this because we want to, not because I've got a carrot or a stick over here that's telling me if I want to get to that, or if I want to get away from that, or I want to get relief from this demand and get that carrot, I will do this. All right. So stepping into curiosity, right? That discoverer space, like I said in the beginning, this is really weak for a lot of individuals in that PDA kind of cluster of behaviors. It's hard that advisors kind of overactive, right? Saying, no, this isn't safe. This is going to turn out terrible for you. For some kids, I even sometimes will joke a little bit and be like, do you have a saber-toothed tiger like chasing you? Are you like in the caveman days? Like a rustle in the bush is definitely going to be a saber-toothed tiger when we're talking about this discoverer space, right? Because that advisor is saying, no way, I'm not doing this. So to support that, right, we've got to build up this stepping into curiosity, and we want to do it in that appetitive way that they're moving towards it, because they want to, not because we have arranged contingencies or we have arranged a carrot or arranged a stick for them to do it, right? We want them to do it because they want to move towards what's at the end, based on their values. So you can set up opportunities to be curious kind of outside of their interests. So for PDA guys, that anxiety is a huge piece, right? Anything that's focused on them is likely to stay kind of like, as soon as you focus on them, they're going to smell out that, and it's going to be kind of get them into that level 2 on the noticing grid, level 3, fight, flight, freeze, collapse, right? We are evoke too many emotions. They need relief. They need out. So doing things first that are entirely kind of separate from them, right? And this goes for building kind of noticing skills as well. If you just start labeling your emotions, forget them for a little bit, just label yours, just, immerse the context in emotion speak. That's a useful strategy, but specifically for this discoverer strategy, right? We don't want to ask them to step into spaces themselves right away. Like, hey, I want you to step into talking to this friend, but that's been under aversive control for a really long time, and they just run away, right? Or they turn beet red and, they have been completely muted. They can't talk at all, right? That's just too hard. They don't have enough skills to engage in that type of a big discoverer step at the moment. So think about opportunities away from them, right? You can set up smell jars. It's starting to be spring. So man, go around. How many different smells can you identify? That is stepping into discoverer space, right? Noticing something new. Sensory experiences, right? Get a bunch of different sensory stuff. The game Ned's Head is pretty cool for that. I don't know if they even sell that anymore. Scavenger hunts, different background noises, right? Anything that gets to notice something different and kind of step into that space. And I forgot, sometimes our discoverer does get ignited and we get a hyper focus, right? Like I didn't care at all about kind of space. And then all of a sudden, we're in this hyper discoverer zone. I'm going to read every space book in the library, before it closes, right? Like hyper discovery zone, which is really cool because we know it's there, but it's still pretty weak, right? It's strong in that preferred values realm when we find something. But anyway. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Vicki. There's many free scavenger hunts available on the internet. Yeah. And scavenger hunts are great ways, right? You can step into discoverer space, in a fun way that isn't demanding. It isn't about building skills, but you actually are at the same time. So anything that you can do like that, even stuff like baking, right? Like, I don't know, you can try like a different chocolate chip in your chocolate chip cookies, try butterscotch chips or something. But that's where that kind of get creative, get outside of the box can really help you. And again, tie it to their values, not in a reward consequence way, right? But hey, trying this is going to move you towards this, right? It's going to support you in taking a step this way. Identify people that can help. These aren't, discoverer space isn't like an independent space that they have to do all by themselves. So identify connections, identify coping. Is there a moment kind of when you're in that discoverer space that maybe you need a little relief? You've got to step out and take some time by yourself, right? Maybe you've got to step back, take a little time, watch your iPad for a little bit, whatever it might be. But it's about stepping into that space and doing it so under that appetitive control in a willing way, right? That we're building that willingness, building that whole big repertoire of skills. And we want to move across the tolerance hierarchy, which is kind of down here. I'm doing better. I'm getting better at my at my visuals. They're getting a little prettier. I realize that I haven't updated my visuals in a long time. So working on that on the side. But again, we want to think about doable opportunities. We don't have these poles, right? It isn't kind of, this is easy, this is hard. Every human has so many degrees in between. we have found, we do know that talking about things in a pretend situation are dramatically easier than just throwing somebody into a real situation in an unexpected context. So an example, I'm going to use a crazy example, right? But like lockdown drills at school, right? Talking about a pretend lockdown is way easier than having a lockdown that isn't even expected, right? Like I was in a school and they, by mistake, put us on lockdown, like a real lockdown, right? That context is way harder. It was unexpected and it was live, right? That is so much harder than just talking about a lockdown drill in a pretend scenario or situation. So when you're working on stepping into discoverer space, maybe it is at first just talking about a pretend situation about something, right? A pretend situation about eating lunch with friends, or a pretend situation about sharing your preferred, favorite, most loved toy in the entire world. What is that doable difficulty level for that individual to where they can hold on and carry those emotions with them, right? And not need massive relief, right? Not walk away and go, oh my gosh, I'm sweating to death, right? Like that was so hard. Like you just took all my spoons, if people know spoon theory, but like that task was so hard. You took all my spoons for the day. If you don't know spoon theory, it is a really helpful way to communicate. Much like DNAV, it's a very helpful framework for families to utilize. I'll pull spoon theory into one of these parent learning events at some point too. But so you really want to work up and down this tolerance hierarchy, not step by step, not systematically, but what is doable that moment, that day, right? A tiny step is still a step forward, right? But blowing up, getting to a level 3 on the noticing grid, getting back under that aversive control, fight, flight, freeze, right? That isn't helpful. That doesn't help us build this new history, this new set of skills that we're really looking to build for our kiddos. So you can work up and down this, right? One day you might be sitting in the talking about a pretend situation. Maybe in 2 weeks, you've kind of moved up to pretending in a live context, right? But then next week, dad's out of town, the babysitter's not very preferred, little brother's sick, and you might pop back down to talking about a pretend situation. We know our guys are not linear, right? They do not kind of progress in this beautiful straight line. And actually, I don't know any human that progresses in a beautiful straight line. In all of my years, I've never seen a chart that has a beautiful, perfect straight line because we're all human. So that's okay. It's okay to go up and down this hierarchy. And then again, you want to help your individual to develop those kind of new helpful rules, right? Is my advisor being helpful right now? Is it kind of standing in my way? Is it telling me not to do this because I need relief from emotions showing up? Identify and kind of categorize rules, right? You can even do helpful and not helpful rules. Track how we're stepping into discoverer space and how it worked so that we can kind of start to build that bigger, stronger advisor that can say, oh, wait, well, maybe we can use our discoverer here. Maybe we can have that willingness to kind of jump in, right? And then notice when you try and need to try again, right? Because you don't have enough information. One and done, right? Like that's why I think parents and providers who work kind of with these PDA individuals who are just lovely, right? We avoid making mistakes because so often it's one and done, and it's really hard to get them to step back in that space. So we want to be thoughtful about actually teaching that, right? Like, is this something that I need to do again, right? Do I need to get more information? And you can teach that kind of within the scavenger hunts and the, smelly jars or whatever, right? Do I need to try that again? All right. I got to run right on time. thank you guys so much for joining me. And please, please do fill out the parent feedback form. We want to make these the best we can for you guys. See you next week or in a couple of weeks.